But in people's minds, they built him up to be the Apostle Paul, like literally.
And we only
So
want to save a hero. What if
right.
I had seen the abuse and said, I have an abusive husband, but he's in prison, wrongly in prison for his faith.
You
Can we get
couldn't
him
have.
out?
You couldn't have. You couldn't have. And so people build this person up in their minds. You then become the bearer of bad news when you tell the truth. I finished the book last night, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, I'm so glad you wrote it. But how do you feel after that? Like after you're being really vulnerable and you're laying your whole life out there. I
Yeah,
think,
I actually
yeah.
panicked the day, like a week before it was released. I really panicked. So, yeah, it's very vulnerable, but I kind of went through some of the details so that people could, I guess, I've had a lot of people message me and said it really helped them identify abuse because a lot of the things are so similar. So I guess there was a reason that I went through some of the details was so that people could identify and um, I guess see maybe some stuff in their own life or maybe for future stuff of how abusers kind of or people who I would say abusers are kind of like people who oppress and control. It's not all about physical abuse. So that you can
Well,
kind of see.
when you first started, going public with it, I obviously you've got my support, but I didn't know what you were talking about. And
Yeah.
so when you do lay it out, it hurts. It hurts to read. I'm so sorry. It's what I mean. That is abuse. I mean, it's clearly, but it's interesting that you had to come around to recognizing that. I think that's probably normal too for people who suffer like that, right?
Yeah, and I'm just gonna be honest, it was so embarrassing and I felt so ashamed. Because one, I didn't see it. Once I saw it, then I was like, duh, like how did I not see it? But also that it became so public. Coming from Middle Eastern culture and also the church culture, like you don't air your dirty laundry, and I had done a good job of holding it back for so many years, and it
Yeah.
just felt embarrassing. It's kind of like kind of what I describe in the book, being at a dinner and all of a sudden throwing up, like getting messing up this nice dinner, and it just felt really embarrassing to be throwing up publicly. As you know, I didn't intend for it to be public. I kind of shared with a few people and it kind of hit media. And so but then it just felt embarrassing for all my personal stuff to be out there. And then the more I tried to explain, like you said, it was confusing for you. And you were definitely I was actually just recently talking to Lance Ford, who
Uh-huh.
is a mutual friend. I just met him. But I said Brant was one of the like handful of people that was like supportive. But
Huh.
again, you were also confused.
Yeah, I just
So
didn't know. And because you couldn't talk about it. And the thing that struck me, there's a lot in this book that hurts to read. And I'm so glad you wrote it. And it's so good. So when I say it hurts, I don't mean it shouldn't have been written. It should have. But I've been through this as the kid in the household where my mom looks back and she kicks herself like, why did I put up with that for so long? And you've got a pastor husband who's very public, and she they got divorced and then remarried, even though I was like, please don't get remarried. And they did. And so she's looking back now, like, why didn't I see this? And she'll describe things and we'll remember things. I see your cat. Naghmeh's taking care of it. It's so awesome.
okay, they're out.
No, he was cute back there. I liked him. Or her.
They're fighting. So your mom went through some of the same stuff, but it's embarrassing once you see it
It is.
because
And so she kicks herself for that reason. Like, why didn't I? And why? But I'm like, Mom, you wanted this to work. You wanted the
did.
family. You want the family to work. You're actually rooting for this guy too, and so you become gullible, almost like I'll fall for it again, just because I'm hoping against hope that this guy becomes something that he's not. Right?
Well, you have two options: to start seeing it, which means your family would fall apart, or to really believe, even though there's a part of you that says that this is a lie, this is not, there's something in your body saying, it's not right, but you kind of subdue that to keep the family together. And that was ultimately, I was afraid of being a single mom, being divorced, which the probably the most heartbreaking part of it, which was my freedom, was he divorced me. He didn't fight for our marriage. And
Uh-huh.
so I was afraid of that. I was afraid of my kids growing up without a father. You hear all the statistics, like children without a father, especially boys, how they end up. And so that was like my biggest fear. You hear that at church all the time, like the divorce statistic and children without a father and how important it is. And I'm like, I tried everything not to like
Right.
become
Right.
that statistic. And our family became that statistic. And I think that was God's grace to be humbled in that way, because if I hadn't been an abused, divorced, single mom, I would have judged all of those people. And
Uh-huh.
so I would have been a self-righteous person of judging, well, what didn't you do to keep your marriage together? And it really took me doing everything between me and God. Like, if people want to judge why I did what I did, some people have like said stuff, but between me and God, I know I laid down my life for my husband. I did everything to get him out, and I even when he was being mean from prison, I was being kind to him. And so it really took me giving it my all to see, wait, like this isn't going to save the marriage. And so it kind of broke me, humbled me to, so that I don't judge other people for like, if their marriages fell apart, like, what didn't you do? Did you not pray hard enough? Did you not submit more? Or, and God's like, you prayed, you fasted, you submitted, and it still fell apart. So stop judging people. And so, and I see that as a gift in my life, because if I had to do it all over again, I wanted to be a missionary. That was my number one passion in life. And I didn't know I would walk through the road of abuse. I expected persecution when I went to Iran as a Christian. I kind of knew what I was stepping into, persecution from the Muslim world, especially the Iranian government just being so crazy. But I didn't expect abuse, and I didn't expect to talk about this hard topic. It's not a fun topic. I mean, you get so many platforms talking about missions, and also like under like intense governments, you don't really get much platforms talking about, especially like going into platforms and saying these kind of platforms are dangerous. And so not a lot of pastors want you to talk about that, which actually I love that my book, I don't, I want my testimony to be, be a source of healing for the church and setting people free. But I don't necessarily, I have to be honest, I get bothered by platforms. um it's lifting someone up, having come from the house church movement. You're all the same, you're in a home, but it's like stepping up on a platform, all of a sudden people think you're better or have something better to say. But all of us have a testimony, and none of us are better or more spiritual than the other person. So
You're singing my song there. So really the book has three main themes to it. Well, one, and I want people to read it because this could be a movie, like your childhood. People don't know much about Iran or how it was before the revolution. They don't, or Afghanistan, like in the 60s. You'll see women walking around in dresses and it's beautiful and looks more
yes.
Western. Like they have no idea it wasn't always this way. Um, and if I highly encourage you, you're listening to this interview, read about Naghmeh's experience growing up in Iran, and why she and her family fled Iran is fascinating. It's again, it's like reading The Kite Runner or A Thousand Splendid Suns or something. Once you understand a little bit of somebody else's culture and background, it's astonishing. And how you and your twin brother became Christians in spite of in spite of your parents when you were tiny is amazing. Like, so I want people to read that. The other facet we've already jumped into, which is your relationship with Saeed. and your efforts to free him once he was in prison in Iran, and the heartbreak of dealing with this marriage when it really had no chance from your end. And then the last part of it is what you just hit on. I love all three parts, but your ability to see the church for the business that it's become
That was
is very
awesome.
welcome. Yeah. And
That's
that'll
why I love
cause,
all your books.
yeah.
All your
Well,
books put together, it really talks about that.
yeah, I told it's in
You're
asking.
very like subtle about it, but you that's what you're saying.
Absolutely. It's the same thing about the platforms. Like, you don't even, like, when we put somebody on a platform, everybody wants somebody to be Superman or Superwoman. They're rooting for this human savior. And it could be, let's use Tim Tebow as an example. Like,
Mm,
he's just a guy. I
yep.
like him. I like him. I've met him. He works with Cure. I mean, he's great. He's like anybody else. But it's like, you're not actually helping this person by idolizing them. You're
No.
actually you're actually distorting this person. You're distorting a pastor, or if you want to call it a pastor, somebody who speaks every Sunday. If you're like,
Mm,
he's so great, he's so wonderful, like, that's actually not healthy for him or her.
no. I think that was a big part of, I mean, ultimately God is sovereign and control, but I think that's ultimately part of why our family was this kind of dismantled is there was some change inside at the beginning, as I talk about in my book. He was really broken and humbled. He wrote some amazing letters from prison, and my dad visited him. There was some amazing changes, and the moment he got a smartphone and saw his fame, and he was really treated like a superhero, and so was I would be in front of invited to a 30,000 mega church, and I was also in that road of being treated like a hero. We're not. There's only one hero. There's only one
Right,
savior. His name is Jesus. And
right.
in home churches, as I describe in my book, because I struggled, like, why are we seeing so many pastors and leaders fall? Is it them or is it the system? And I really think it's the system. And a lot of it, of course, narcissists are drawn to a place of power, but also the system kind of injects them with pride and separates them from normal people. And so they start believing the lie that they are a superhero. We're not. And God saved me from that. It was a painful fall, but every time I was invited to speak at some churches recently, and I even in Netherlands, and I said, do you know what my book is about? It's about not having a platform. And so are you
Okay,
sure you want me to speak about this? And
okay.
so,
So what's their response to that?
it's interesting. God has given me an open door to talk about this because of my mission work.
Yeah.
Um, and so people don't necessarily want to talk about how toxic the system is or abuse, but they want to talk about Iran and me and my brother getting saved out of Islam. And then that opens the door. And then I talk about the platform and they go, huh. And I tell them, I mean, had real conversation with my pastor who replaced my other pastor that, probably you knew
Hmm.
their family,
Hmm.
which was devastating for me. But I told him, I said, this system's not good for you. It's
No,
bad for you.
no.
It's bad for your family. And so we have real conversations. But yeah, the platforms I don't like because it automatically tells people I'm better than you or I'm more spiritual than you. We're not. All of us have our own struggles and sins, and it's by grace of God. And there's only one hero that and that's Jesus. And we need to stop lifting each other up. And so yeah,
There's
I struggle with platforms.
there's this moralistic desire, I think, that people have just by nature, even people who should know better as Christians, that they're actually wanting somebody to prove that the good person can be real, like,
Mm.
that someone who's
Yeah.
just real, like, just almost angelic, that person. No,
Yeah.
everybody else is messed up, but this guy,
He's
he is
perfect.
so close to perfect. Like, we know Jesus, but he's really,
He's
there's
not
like
perfect,
this.
but he's almost there.
Oh, he's almost there. And so there's this willing gullibleness on behalf of people who should know better. And
And
I
Said was
go ahead.
becoming that too. And Said was becoming that. And he was
Yes.
in, and as he was watching online his fame and attention, he was being injected with pride. And so
Right.
and that, I'm just gonna, I mean, I think that had a huge role in, let's say, and I know God allowed all of this, but let's say he had continued in this humble, broken road, and the fame and attention and him being a superhero that's almost perfect had not happened. I don't know what would have happened. Maybe if he would have come out the way he was the first few years, the brokenness without the fame, realizing how famous he was becoming. I mean, I don't know. I can't process that, but I know it was bad for our family. So the best thing that actually happened to our family was when I went silent for 3 years and just got rid of all the attention and focused on my children and living a normal life in Boise, Idaho, with no attention, nothing. But, I think it was when I lost my dad to COVID and was going through a depression that God really helped me process the war, being an immigrant, getting saved out of Islam, but then at 9, but then all of that, everything, even the trauma from the war, which still I realized, like, even with recent stuff that's coming out from Middle East and Israel, like this, hearing the sirens, like my body literally started shaking
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I grew up with. So I think during my dad, when I went through that depression, it really helped me process everything and then process all the abuse and the system and compare it to the house church movement in Iran. And it just all clicked. And I just felt like God wanted me to share my testimony, because in Revelation, we read it's by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. So there's something powerful when each of us share our journey.
Yes. Yes. And it's freeing to other people. So it's the very thing that people would be uncomfortable maybe on the mega church platform, say, hey, let's have Naghmeh come talk about abuse and like, but that's the very thing that people need to hear. So I'm there's several things I want to just commiserate with you about, but one of them is what you just said about, as an adult, things can trigger stuff that you're like, that was a long time ago. Like, it was a
I didn't even,
relatively it
yeah.
was a relatively short period of time, a relatively long time ago. That's our childhood, right? But I was talking with a counselor recently, last couple of years, and I was saying that, like, I'm just frustrated that this stuff would come up. I'm a grandpa now. Like that things would still resonate and ring bells when he's like, look, th- that's formative. like
Mm,
like like a duck imprints on whoever's around it after it comes out of the shell or whatever. It's like, that's how we're made. That's so formative. You with your little brother, you had a sister too, right? And your dad and mom negotiating for that, listening to the planes flying overhead, listening for explosions, hearing, like, that's that doesn't go away like
no,
just lickety split. And the stuff that you've gone through with Saeed, in the public trauma,
yes.
that's legit. I mean, you can't just go, well, I should be over this by now, because it's not human. You know what I
No,
mean?
I do struggle with that. I'm glad you talk about the public trauma, and because the reaction of the public to the abuse was really traumatic, especially the Christian world. And so yeah, the war, I thought that was like 40, almost 40 years ago. And when I heard the sirens, I hadn't heard the sirens until recently, when someone sent me a video of stuff happening in the Middle East and the sirens
Uh-huh.
were going off, and then my body physically started
Yeah.
shaking.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, and so there's so much still, even still now I tell, I'm very reluctant to speak at churches. I tell them it's very traumatic for me to be standing on a platform. I don't like it. And it's the praises of men triggers me. I have to be honest, because then it's like the Christian world really praised me and then they pulled me down. And so it's kind of, well, it's not bad, but it's just I keep looking to Jesus. Like I'm not,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And it's, so you realize, I know you do, like, people are so immature. They're not discipled. they convert or whatever that means, like, but they don't become followers of Jesus. They're not shaped that way. So they're still rooting for this spiritual hero to come about, like Saeed. And I helped you get the word out, like a lot of other people in the media. And we're not saying, here's this guy, here's this list of problems, and he's in prison, because that's just not going to work, right? It doesn't, we don't know. But in people's minds, they built him up to be the Apostle Paul, like literally thought
Mhm.
he was like, we're still wanting
And
that. So
we only
you
want to
become
save a hero. And we only
so
want to save a hero. What if,
right.
yeah, what
So
if I
you
had seen the abuse and said, I have an abusive husband, but he's in prison, wrongly in prison for his faith.
you
Can we get
couldn't
him
have,
out?
you couldn't have, and so people build this person up in their minds. You then become the bearer of bad news when you tell the truth. Now, who likes that? Like, you just popped our balloon. That's so, like, that's because of the immaturity. Instead of people who, I imagine people like me who've been through this kind of stuff are like, that rings a bell. I bet that's right. And I'm so sorry. I'm just so sorry. And I know, like, but a lot of people, I don't think they can handle that. They couldn't,
Yeah,
clearly they couldn't handle it.
I'm like, that was the
Yeah.
emotional hard part. Was my Christian community turned on me, and they couldn't imagine a superhero also being abusive. And as I said, I didn't want it to get out on media. It did, and stones got
No.
thrown. And you know, we can't imagine, you know, our heroes having flaws or um yeah, that was probably the most painful part of the journey. Well, I would say the divorce was very hard because I felt like I'm going to be honest, I was worthless. I was not worth fighting for him to, because I would have waited for him to change. I just wanted him to get help on some of the serious issues, but that was painful, but also the reaction of the Christian community. But I remember a post you did, I didn't get a casserole or something. It had to do with your
Oh
mom. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
want
yeah,
mommy a casserole.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
good. Wow, I still remember. People still remember that article, and they're like, "Remember you shared that?" Where it's like you're going through a divorce. It's like you also become like this unclean person, and people don't want to touch you. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to talk about it. It's so messy. It's so
And you're
uh,
grieving. And that was the whole point of that post, was like, I don't get a casserole. If somebody passes away, it's, you're in the grieving process, and people, if hopefully people care and make a casserole, but they don't know what to do with
mm,
what you're dealing with now.
yes, it's a
And you're
grieving.
left, yeah, that's it's doubly hard. I gotta tell you, I'm really cynical about narcissists in ministry. So I'm thinking, you had, I mean, you kept running up against this. So you saw these heartfelt letters early on in the prison scene. But I'm thinking, being a cynical person, like, I've seen religious people turn it
Mm,
on and off at
yes,
will. And it can be
and we fall
horrible.
for
Yeah. We fall for it. They can be so horrible, and then suddenly, no, no, and they can talk the language, and they're so good at manipulation. It's
it. And
yeah.
when it has to do with your marriage, you want to believe it. Like
Yes, you
you said,
do.
you want to believe there's change. So I agree that it could be another form of manipulation. The letters, the his confession. I mean, the one of the biggest part was when he confessed to my dad that he was sorry. He'd never said he was sorry. And so things like that, but there's a part of you that goes, okay, I'm going to believe it
Yeah.
because we will have a family together and a healthy family, hopefully. So yeah, it's so hard. I think as I talk about my book, and I mean, I talk about it in my book, as I've processed abuse of power, I think I don't think Christianity was meant to be so big and powerful.
No, it's not.
We were supposed to be meek and small and weak. And that's
Yeah.
where the comes from. I mean, look at Iran. I think the poverty with the sanctions is insane, but with the Christians, it's even more worse because Christians are often not, if they're not in prison or killed, they're not getting good jobs, they're not getting education. they're the weakest, smallest part of society, and yet the house church movement in Iran continues to grow, and the Iranian government, who seems to hold so much power. I mean, now I don't know. I've been getting messages from the churches in Iran that they're worried about a possible war happening with Iran because of their backing of Hamas or whatever. But they're really weak and persecuted, but the gospel is going forth really strong.
Yeah.
And God is being glorified in amazing ways. And the Iranian government, that doesn't answer to anyone, they say their number one threat to their national security is the Christians, who are weak and small. And so, I just kind of, having processed all the abuse and the system, I think, sometimes we think we have to be big and powerful as Christians to win the world, and we're actually losing our influence. What if we become small and meek and weak? And it's hard because it's the cross. It's like making yourself small and weak. And but that's what I love about a lot of your messages in your book, because that's getting to the core of it, and that's where a lot of peace comes from. When you're like, how about I tried the road of the narrow road, the road to the cross, where it's, you just kind of take it and ask God for that spirit of humility and meekness, and it's okay to be weak and small, and then see how God moves, and that's what we're seeing in Iran. They're small.
Let him have the master plan. Let him be the visionary, not one of us who, I talked to, have you read Chuck DeGroat's book? He wrote about narcissism in the church. Have you seen this book?
I've heard about it. I haven't read
Yeah,
it.
it's good. I asked him, like, because he teaches at seminary. He's like, I don't understand why I don't know if he said I don't understand, but he just said, we have a ton of students when they come in who test very high on the narcissism, like,
Because they want
profile.
to be in a place of power.
Right. So I'm like, what does it say about whatever position we created that it attracts narcissists? And I said, wouldn't it be a fun, he did not think it was a good idea. I don't know why, but I thought it was smart, but I guess it wasn't. I was like, why don't you, like, make it a class project, draft a senior pastor, like, job description that would repel every narcissist that looked at it. It would be like, I don't want that job. And now we're
Yep.
onto something. Now we're talking. But I just like, that'd be a fun thing to draft, because actually pastoring people is the opposite of narcissistic.
Oh, it's hard. Paul says, like, we as apostles, we often go hungry, thirsty. We're like homeless. We're like, they're insulted all the time. They're scum of the earth. And it's interesting. I kind of, that's the conclusion I kind of reached myself. It's with the house churches, I met Said at a building church, a platform. He was a part of the worship. So people are drawn to that position. But with house churches, that was what was confusing to me. I said, we never really saw a problem with that. Why? And and in a nation that has had Islam for 1400 years, where it's taught that women are second class, their possessions, and they're mistreated in the Muslim world. But then in the house church movement, they're honored, and you see women actually co-leading with men, and they're working in the harvest together. And it really confused me of, why am I seeing this in the Middle East, where women should not be treated with such honor, like overcoming the culture. But it's in the home churches, narcissists aren't drawn to it, or don't necessarily want to be a leader, because it means you're the first to go. You're the first to be arrested. You're the first to be killed. So it doesn't really draw a lot of hirelings or narcissists. And so I think you're onto something. If we really had a definition of what it means to be a shepherding God's people, and if we use Paul as the example, he had to defend himself. He didn't benefit from any of that. I think not a lot of narcissists would want to sign up. And I think that's how God has kind of protected the house churches from that influence, is being a shepherdess. We say pastors or shepherd or shepherdess. In the house churches, it really is a lot of hard work. You get 10
You
to
bet.
15. You don't get a big platform. You get 10 to 15 people or 20 people to minister, to clean up after, serve. and then you're the first to go if anything happens. You're the first one that the government arrests and imprisons
And
or kills.
even more dangerous than that, in that if you're actually going to be a spiritual shepherd of people in a simple church type setting, even more dangerous, people will know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That means
Yep.
you don't get to pull anything, because if I can see how you mistreat your wife, bro,
Mm-hmm.
everything you say, you can be like, well, the Bible said, like, sorry, we're not listening. And so what happens is the people, the men and women who are wise, and you can see how they live their lives, and you can see how they pour themselves and serve other people, they instantly become, not instantly, but over time, it's obvious who the leaders are. There's no
Mm-hmm.
title, but it becomes obvious. Anybody who steps into that simple church
Yeah.
will be able to identify, okay, I see who the leaders are, but it's not a title. It's because they serve other people and they have wisdom, instead of I can talk good, or I can play
Paul wouldn't
guitar.
have made it. Paul wouldn't have made it. Paul was
Right. No,
not a.
right. No. So it becomes all this, it totally inverts who is attracted to doing this. And then you actually don't let people get away with holding forth if you can see that their own families, their own life doesn't support it, because we know you.
Yeah, and in smaller settings like home groups, house churches, I'm not saying that we should necessarily go that, but it really, having been part of that and then seeing the sickness here,
Yeah.
everyone calls each other brother and sister. And so it's confusing at first. You walk into a house church and brother this, sister this, and you're like, so who's the pastor? Oh, brother Luke is the, brother Brant. Like, oh, but everyone's called brother and sister. No one's called pastor or anything. And so there's no titles. And yeah, and I think that's a big part of it is, and whoever's doing their job, whoever's laying down their life and serving the flock, and they're not necessarily great speakers. I mean, Paul wasn't a great speaker, and he wouldn't have made it to the, I don't think he would be able to have much of a platform here,
Hmm.
so.
Yeah, totally. So you told a story about, and this wasn't that long ago. I think I remember this on your Facebook. You were talking about a woman who's a single mom, and I have talked about this sort of thing again and again. It just doesn't make any sense. But tell that story about her and her hope to get help and finances and stuff.
Yeah, there's something in me, and I think the pastors I work with appreciate, maybe, I don't know. We do have a lot of arguments, and also a lot of, we've worked things out. But yeah, single mom who I got to know through divorce care. She was deathly afraid of becoming homeless again. 2 years earlier, she had become homeless and slept in her car for about a year, and she had 3 girls that she had to have sleep at different people's houses so they wouldn't be sleeping in the car. She worked her way out, of course, helping her. And unfortunately, it's so confusing. And this culture means you're giving a handout, which is not biblical. She had come out of an abusive marriage where she hadn't worked. She had homeschooled. She's entering the workforce for the first time in a long time, or for the first time ever, because she just went straight from school to being a mother. And so she comes and asks the church for help, and they give her like $250, and they basically say, we don't have any more, and don't come here, don't ask for a handout. Just mistreated her. Like, it was shameful for her to even come and ask for help, and the way she was treated, it was horrible. And so I kind of looked at the church pie chart. Someone sent it to me, and I'm like, oh, $5 million. Like, $5 million is coming in. We only have like 250 to give to a widow. A true widow. She has no one. She literally had no one. Her story's pretty sad. But so I kind of shared it, and there was a lot of conflict and working it out with the pastors, but we are still working things out. But it's a system. That's what it made me look at the system. How is a system that's bringing the early church, or even the house church in Iran, when you have money, you give to those in need.
To meet needs, right? Right.
Because you're in a home, you don't have to spend that much money on a home. You already have the home. You meet in homes. So when you have a widow, the Bible talks about them being put on a list. there's a season where they need to be helped, not just once. Sometimes it's 6 months to a year where they can actually get back on their feet. And we did that in the home churches in Iran, having come out of no blueprint of how to do church. It was by the work of the Holy Spirit, because we were doing house church in Iran where there was no such a thing for 1400 years. Christianity had been wiped out. The Persians, who were one of the first to, in the Bible, Old Testament and the New Testament, the book of Acts, to be one of the first people to become Christians, it's completely wiped out for 1400 years. No one knows how to do church, but the way it was functioning, it was helping the poor. There was really not a lot of need, because people were really distributing the need, giving, even though they themselves were in need. And the money didn't go to buildings. And so I was very shocked that out of the 5 million, when I looked into it, 3 million just went into running the building and having 4 services a month. And then you have the poor and needy coming, and you say, I don't have any money. And it just shocked me. And so it really made me look at the system, because I knew the pastors. I was like, it can't be just them. There has to be. So we're having we've built a business system, and we're operating as a business where, in a business, my dad was a businessman, as you know, from my book. I was in the business world. I helped build up his business from 5 people to over 100 people that he was hiring here in Boise area, mostly refugees. But so I've worked where we built like $1 million business or millions of dollars. And the church the more I looked at how the church operated, it was like a business, but in a way, a very badly run business, because you have a few $1 million operating business. You really focused on your customers. And but the church is like, a few at top are serving, millions are being made out of tithe money that's supposed to go to the body, but it's going to the top and the business. And you're actually neglecting most of the people. I talked to one of the elders and I said, you're neglecting the least of these, which in Corinthians, the Bible talks about the part that's least important, you should honor the most. And it says the part that actually has a lot of honor, you don't need to pay attention to it. We do the opposite, And so we have a business system where so I told this elder, I said, you're neglecting the least of these. He said, no, we're actually neglecting everyone. He agreed with that. You have a few on top who are trying to serve a few thousand person church. They can't. And they're sucking up all the money. And so is the building and mortgage and all of that. So it just doesn't make sense to me. I think there's wisdom of why the church did so well the first few hundred years when it was in homes. And then we became rich and powerful and started building buildings. Thus the birth of the Catholic Church, or what is it called, which is the universal church. And actually, if you look at the history of church, we kind of went downhill after that. We started becoming rich and powerful, but we start losing our influence in society. And the abuse epidemic in the Catholic Church, now in the Protestant Church,
Well, you create all these power networks and hierarchies. I heard somebody say that the Greeks made Christianity a philosophy, and the Romans made it a government, and Americans made it a business. And I think that's true. Everything you said, obviously, I'm totally on board with. It's very difficult though, because you'll talk to people, and some people can't. They think what we're doing is the biblical way. They think the Bible had a stage and a pulpit, and the Bible had there's all this stuff that we think they had. That's just the way it is. We have a senior pastor. That's just like in the Bible. That's not in the Bible either. Like we made this. It doesn't mean it's wrong per se to have a stage, but it's not the biblical. It's not like this is the way it has to be. So that every time we start a thing, we got to get a band. We got to have a high overhead. We have to make it difficult to replicate. When anyone knows that anything that's healthy and growing has a simple DNA that can replicate easily. So that's the brilliant. Yes, it's the simple church, house church. I say simple church only because you don't have to meet in a house. You can meet, you can meet anywhere, at the library, at the beach, at the park, or whatever. But this simple thing, making disciples doesn't cost that much money wise.
No.
It's like if you're actually discipling.
Yeah, even building churches, there are healthy ones out there. I've met pastors
Sure.
who truly serve, who truly lay down their lives. So I agree, not just house church, simple church. That's biblical. Has a biblical model. We kind of get rid of that business model, and if we do kind of move towards the biblical model, I don't think we'll have as many narcissists attracted to it, or
Totally.
people who are injected with pride and puffed up that fall into um the pastors that fall. But yes, I agree with you that I would have said, I mean, this is church, we've had this system for 1700 years. I wouldn't have not noticed if there was anything wrong. I would have said, well, this is church, except that I got to see the move of the Holy Spirit in the underground church in Iran. So I was like,
Yeah.
how are we not having an epidemic of abuse in the house church? Like, how it's in a country that has been Muslim for 1400 years, and that's when it all came together. I was like, oh, maybe this system, the way we've done it, the business style, and the way we choose leaders, it's so anti-biblical, and that's why we're seeing all this epidemic. And it's like you don't repeat something that's not giving an outcome. Look at all the movement that's happening with so many people becoming Christians, and then look at our models and how less and less people are coming to church, and
Yes,
we're
it's not
not seeing it.
working.
It's not
Like you said,
working.
even if you judge it by business standards, it's not a good business because it's
No.
declining, and we're spending billions on a model that actually is not working. So
That's actually what I told my pastor. I said, even if we look at the business of it, it's not working.
right, it's not a good business. Right. So keep my thing on the platform. I think you're probably already tracking on this, but my thing is, as long as people want to hear me speak, I'll do it. I'm not
Yes.
going to change what I'm saying, though. I'm not going to be like, I need to be on that platform or that one, so I won't say this or I won't say, like, no. If they're going to give me a chance, I'm going to keep walking through the door and being faithful with it. So it's not, I'm not against the stage or microphone. I'll speak all day somewhere, but if
And I have to say,
I'm not
yeah.
changing what I'm going to say. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
No,
I just,
no.
I agree. I have to say one thing that has been so soothing for me reading your books. I'm very careful what books I read. I do get triggered a lot. And I do not like, I just, so I people send me links and videos. And so there's only a few people that I'm like, okay, like this is, so the reason I actually enjoy reading a lot of your books and listening to you and the videos is you have an underlying message of humility that's actually soothing. If we take that on, and it's when we start puffing up and acting strong and powerful and prideful, it's like we we're offended, unoffendable. I love that book.
Uh,
And so but all of your books have this underlying messages. If we actually take on that place of humility, so
mhm.
much of our anxiety, our um,
Yes,
fighting, our all of that, and we would have so much peace in our life. And
totally.
also what we talked about today, ultimately, if we can really represent, be in a place in leadership where leadership really, we take on what Jesus said, being a servant and taking on that humility. I think a lot of the epidemics that we're seeing with abuse and
Yep.
so many people being traumatized by the church where they're supposed to be healed. Like, it's supposed to be a place of healing and refreshing and thriving, and the world is supposed to see us and be like, wow, we want to be a part of that, and we're not. And so I think it really boils down to, which, like I said, a lot of your books that's so soothing to read is like humility. Take
Mm.
that place of humility. And I am just gonna, I don't know ultimately, but I think the pride and people lifting our family up was a big part of us falling apart. And God rescued me out of that celebrity Christian world. And I'm so thankful for that. And I'm not saying I'm better but I was on that road as well. Um, and our family, I mean, Said's fame really ultimately became his enemy.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So, do you ever read any Dallas Willard? Do you know who he is? You don't
No,
have to.
as I
Okay, don't
said,
worry
I
about it.
only There's only a few people I listen to or read, and you're one of them.
Well,
I'm
I
very
appreciate that. I appreciate that. He embodied to me. He was a philosophy professor at USC for decades, and he wrote a lot of big selling books and whatnot. But the guy was anti-celebrity, celebrating particular people and not others. So people said about him, and I love this. Like if you go speak somewhere, I want to be this way too, and I hope I am. And somebody takes you aside and wants to talk to you about what he's like. Anybody who interacted with him, he's so dialed in on whoever's in front of him
Mm.
that if there's big shots over here, like, well, hey, we need to introduce you to, he's like, no, I'm talking to
Oh,
17-year-old Steve. And like that to me, like that sounds like Jesus to me. Like the crowd just kind of disappears. And so
it
I'm
doesn't
like,
matter.
yeah,
I sorry.
oh, it's all right. I think you read The Men We Need, didn't you? I'm not
Yes.
putting you on the
Oh,
spot. Okay. So
yes.
what I remember is you said something nice about it. And I was like, that means a lot coming from you because of what you've been through. And I'm writing a book about masculinity. And if someone like you can
Thank
read it,
you.
not be triggered and actually go,
Yes.
yep, there you go. That was like good. I hit the target. Made me happy.
That's why I'm so careful on what I read,
Yeah.
because even the whole discussion on masculinity is
Yeah.
so triggering, can be so hard to read. And so I'm so
I'm
sorry.
sorry you're I'm no, I'm sorry you're choking. I'm the one who's sorry you're choking. Don't worry about it. I would help, but on Zoom it's difficult, you know. We can call people there.
I'm gonna drink some water.
Okay.
I'm gonna be honest, it's like, this day and age, people send you podcasts and YouTube videos and books to read. And I don't read 90 some percent of them. There's because I've learned over the years to kind of protect myself from being triggered,
Yeah.
and masculinity and is such a big part of that because um just being raised in that Christian culture of what a head means and submission to that, and also my conflict with famous evangelical leaders and just the whole being manhandled
Yeah.
um has been so hard for me to just to be honest, to listen to men or to so I haven't read a lot of authors. I do listen to your stuff and I read your books because it's soothing to me, having come out of so much trauma from the war to like the whole headship stuff and the way masculinity has been defined
Uh-huh.
and all of that. And so I really appreciate it because there's an undertone, and also um, that really going back to what the gospel says it is. Because when we follow what the world said it is, it's really very harmful and damaging and traumatic. And the church and us as Christians being the voice or a representation of Christ should be soothing and healing and comforting and wanting others, like, I think about all the Muslim women to come to see like the true, like, um what it means to be part of the body of Christ and not have this
Yeah.
place of the way men have abused that power in a lot of ways. And you made a video too a while ago that I shared about how Jesus treated women.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that was like, so this is like soothing to so many who have
Huh.
gone through, so much stuff, and just really looking at that, the culture where the Middle East culture that I'm
Uh-huh.
from, what Jesus did today is radical. Today,
Shocking.
2,000
Yes.
years later, is still
Yes.
radical. And like I think in your video you talked about men and women being separated. Today in the Middle East, men and women are separated.
Yep.
And so the way Jesus interacted with women in today in the Middle East is still radical. And
Yep.
so yes, I I really appreciate you being a voice for that. And God using you to soothe areas where the enemy has damaged, and use the name of Jesus to damage that and say, no, that's not actually true. That's not the gospel, you
Yeah.
know.
Good. Well,
So,
that's encouraging to me. Thank you. I like interviews where we wind up talking about me and my books and stuff. That's the
oh.
best. So
Well, I wanted to talk about your new book. It's coming out on
no,
my
yeah. Oh,
February.
is it really? Okay. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Well,
So,
I don't know which day in February, but my birthday is in February. So,
oh, is it? Okay. Well, it'll be out in time for that. But thank you for all you're doing. Keep doing your thing. Like, I'm rooting for you. I was happy to see that you became friends with Lance. I didn't know that. Like, I didn't put those two together until I saw the photo. I'm like, no way, they know each other. That's the coolest thing because
I just
he's
met him.
awesome.
Yeah. I just met
Yeah.
him at a conference and he sent me some of your podcasts,
Oh yeah,
which
we did a podcast together.
which I sent to my pastors.
Oh good, hooray!
Yeah.
Good. Well, Naghmeh, thank you. God bless you and your kids and all you're doing.
Thank you. God bless you.
Keep talking. Oh, hey, I'm going to hold this. I'm not even sure we're going to use the video, but this is her book. Those books are fake. This is a curtain. This is real. This
Did
is
you get the
so.
one I signed for you?
Yes, I did. Bam.
Oh, that's the one. Okay.
Made me happy. Look, if I could be like, oh, let me go back and oh, look, I grabbed this book. So it really is a fun read. Strangely enough, it's compelling. I should say that. Maybe not fun, but incredibly compelling. So God bless you, Naghmeh.